Hey everyone, Gibby here, and we just received some new Arcasia's Island updates from Ravensburger for the set championships specifically, and I just wanted to take a couple minutes to run down what those changes are and maybe some thoughts that Ian, Lindsay, and I have about these changes. We kind of discussed it pretty extensively when the rules came out yesterday, and we do have some thoughts. So let's just get into it. Let's go from the top down. So first thing, they are changing what the prize support looks like. Uh, Historically, we've received a champion mat if you win a set championships at a store, and then the second place, the runner up, received the same art of the mat. It just didn't have the word champion in the corner. Ravensburger has done away with that second place mat. It's only just a champion mat now, so you have to top your event if you want to get that mat. And I can say across the board, we're not really a big fan of this. I don't know if it's a matter of cost cutting that they're doing this or if it's for another reason, but it feels like it's really tough to top an event, and it almost feels like it's pushing out some of the more either casual or mid-range kind of players that are hopeful of maybe even getting to the finals, or just doing the best that they can and maybe getting the chance at getting a mat. I know there are people, you see it post all the time where people rack up 3 and 4 and 5 different mats. And who knows, maybe this will dissuade some people from playing in multiple events if they've already gotten a champion mat, or at least playing something different. So they're challenging themselves a little bit, just knowing that there is less prize support out there for the mats, but it is making the mats more exclusive. I wish they kind of kept that in there. I've yet to secure myself a champion mat, but I have gotten several second places with mats, and I love having them. I think it's my favorite prize support from the said championships. I'm a little disappointed to hear that they're doing away with about half of those. The alternate art foil for the Enchanteds, for the promos, this set is going to be the hero Hamada. You can see the foil and the non-foil version here. The top 8 receiving a foil version of the promo card, that itself remains the same as prior sets. What they are adding, though, while they are getting rid of the second place mat, they are adding 40 alternate art non-foil promo cards for those that I don't know if you have to pre-register for the event, or if you just participate in the event, then you get those. So any extras, I don't know what the stores are expected to do with those. But if you compete in the event, is my assumption that you get one of those non-foil promos. A little kind of note in here, if an event doesn't have at least 8 players, the store is expected to, in good faith, send back the prize support to the Ravensburger office, which, okay, I get it. Some stores don't necessarily have the support that they probably wish they did, or maybe they're in an area where Lorcana isn't the biggest game. And I hope most stores are at least able to scrape together 8 players, or maybe move around their dates, since they have opened up the amount of weeks that these stores can run their set championships. I do think that helps with the player count, because that way players aren't having to choose one location or the other. So maybe the 8-player minimum isn't necessarily going to be a problem. Here we get kind of a breakdown of kind of what I described earlier, with just the champion play mat and the foil promos, and then just some examples here. This will be what the champion mat looks like for this next upcoming set. We've got the top 8 foil card here, and then just the participation, as I'm going to call it, non-foil promo here. Moving down to the tournament details here, we do have some changes to the format as well for set championships. The core constructed kind of structure here, it is going to remain a Swiss format, and then cutting to a top bracket, similar to how events have been run in the past for set championships. But we do have a couple of differences here. First thing I want to touch on is this inclusivity statement here, which I think is really interesting. Players are allowed in your venue, cannot be restricted from this event for any reason other than physical space requirements to ensure fairness and inclusivity for the community. Across the board, Lindsay, Ian, and I really love this statement, because Lorcana does host a very wide variety of backgrounds, of peoples, of ideas, identities, and genders, and all of that. And we don't really know what sort of event caused them to feel like they need to put this statement out, if there has been some sort of inclusivity issues in the past that they felt like they needed to put a hard stance in this. Overall, I do think this is a fantastic statement to say, hey, regardless of who you are, where you come from, and as long as you're here to have fun and play this game that we all love and enjoy, then you should be allowed and should be welcomed with open arms to play in these events. Obviously, physical space and player count permitting, as long as an event isn't like at maximum capacity, for example. Now, the one thing that we do want to note is this statement doesn't necessarily mention anything about players who are having conduct issues, like if they're coming in and they're being rude or being mean or disruptive to the running of an event or to the other players that are trying to play in the event, and they've got bad conduct. This statement, off of the back of the whole sharking incident that happened in the Australia DLC, it's odd to me that they also didn't add a statement in there kind of specifying that this is just at a base. You can't be stopped from competing in an event because of who you are, but not necessarily, or like your physical appearance or anything like that, or any groups that you belong to. But they still dissuade the community from, like, you need to have proper conduct, and you still have to be a good person throughout the event and have good moral and ethics and not cheat and kind of play up and be above board the whole event. That, I think, is still something that is within the standards of Lorcana, and they didn't touch on it on this statement, but I do think that is assumed that you are still conducting yourselves in a proper way. I was looking back at some of the other rules, and I do believe that there is a change here in the Swiss timer. It looked like from some of the other document that's on the Ravensburger website that not unless they just didn't update the other document, and it's always been this way for set championships, but 55 minutes, it looked like it was prior 45 minutes, so they've extended the match timer, and that may be because of this change here. Your choice of best of 3 or 2 game format. I am not a fan that they didn't put their foot down and tell the community this is the way we're going to run our events in this format. They've left it up to the stores. The player base as a whole, I feel, has a pretty starch opinion one way or the other. Not everyone agrees about which one is better, best of 2 or best of 3. I think there are decks that perform better in best of 2 or best of 3. Aggro decks definitely want to be that first player. So it almost feels like if in a best of 3 format, if you're playing a hyper aggro deck, well, the overall outcome of the match on whether you come away with a win or a loss really might be determined based on the dice roll. I think that's going to be very divisive for some players who are going to feel like they got cheated or shorted in a best of 2 or a best of 3 format, depending on what their deck is that they are running, or maybe some prior results that they've had in one or the other. They're going to have some opinions, and I don't know whether that will cause any of the stores issues based on what kind of format that they choose. Something that I want to impress that the community should do is, as you're approaching the set championships coming up for the Arcasia's Island set in the next couple of months, which I believe is going to be towards the end of April, the beginning of May. I think they've announced that the Reign of Jafar is set to release in early May. So that's when I would expect the set championships to happen for this upcoming set 7. Be careful and make sure that you are aware if you're going to be signing up for an event at a location. Don't be afraid to either call the store and ask them, but be aware of what the format is. That way you're not surprised when you show up on what format it is. The top cut itself should still be best of 3, so that won't change, where the going first has a significant advantage. But in the Swiss rounds, you may choose to bring a different deck or play a different way or make a different meta read if you are doing those kinds of things that you're going into a set championships based on what the format looks like. So just be aware before you go into an event what the format is that this store has chosen, now that they have the ability to choose a best of 3 or a best of 2. Here we get a little bit of an additional clarification and breakdown on the top cuts. I don't necessarily know if anything has changed in here. All the events that I competed in the past couple of sets have been 17 players or more, meaning it's always cut to a top 8. So I don't know for smaller events if this changes anything, but here's a breakdown. If you've got 8 players, which is the minimum, as they stated earlier in the document, you'd have 3 rounds of Swiss, and then it's done. There is no top cut. So essentially, if you want to win the event, you need to win out, and you need to have a good strength of schedule or don't even have a strength schedule. I guess it would just be like it'd be like a single elimination bracket from there. You just have to win out if you want to win the event. 9 to 16 players. You have 4 rounds of Swiss and cut to a top 4. In that case, they have also stated that the additional 4 foil promos, if they're only cutting to a top 4, the judge or the event administrator is to look at the standings on Melee and award those additional promos for the foil promos, even though they're cutting to a top 4, to those who have placed within 5, 6, 7, and 8. They would still receive those foil promos. 17 through 32, 33 through 64, and 65 plus players. You can see here this is the number of rounds of Swiss, and they would cut to the top 8. The best of 3 formats, 70 minutes, top 8 and top 4 rounds. So they're increasing the best of 3, or this is the timer for the top 8 and the top 4 is going to be 70 minutes. Odd that it's only 55 minutes in Swiss. I guess that's just in case you have a really large event, like something like 65 players. They want to make sure that there's enough time in the day to continue and get the event done in one day, so they necessarily can't maybe expand it out to 70 minutes. Maybe that's just a little too long for each of the Swiss rounds. They've made a little kind of stance here on the judges. A minimum of 1 judge is required for the event. The judges can't play in the event, which I haven't had any issues with in the past, and the judges should be experienced. Judging itself, I think, is something that has become a hot topic for Lorcana and for Ravensburger to have a little bit of a closer eye on because of some of the issues at the bigger events as of recent. So I don't necessarily know if they'll expand upon. I know they're creating a judges program for some of their bigger events, but for the local store events, it may just be, hey, as long as your administrator knows this, the event administrator knows the rules, you can call judge if you need to, and they'll come over and they're giving a experienced perspective, whether they are a player themselves or they've just been playing card games for a while and they're able to kind of rule on certain cards. I think that should be good enough. They might take a little bit more of a microscope to who the judges are for bigger events. All events are still required to be run on the Melee platform, and I don't know if that's necessarily just so Ravensburger can collect data on it, or if it's just more of a standard process. What it does do, I can tell you from my experience in this last set for Azurite Sea, what it does do is it creates the pairings for the top 8 cut. It does standardize that. So the way I found this out the hard way is Melee, when you go into the top 8, it almost locks the brackets. So it does pair you off 1 versus 8, 2 and 7, 3 and 6, 4 and 5. But regardless of who comes out of those matches as the winner within that top 8 round, and when it pairs you for top 4, you are locked on opposite sides of the bracket. So for example, I was the 4 seed. I ended up being victorious in my top 8 round in one of my set championships against the 5 seed. And the other 3 seeds that came out of it were 1, 6, and 7. My assumption, almost like how a lot of major sports do, is that they would reseed the events, or would reseed the folks. So 1 would play 7 and I would have played at the 6th seed. It doesn't do that. It locks the brackets on either side. So you play whoever comes out of the other side of the bracket as determined in Melee. So something that's good to know if you're trying to figure out who's your next matchup or what that's going to look like if you're advancing far into your tournaments. So far, I think that's it. We may receive more updates as we get closer to set championships, but for now, this is the big update that Ravensburger has given us. We're really excited for the release of Arcasia's Island here in early March, coming next week. If you have any thoughts or opinions about these rule changes or about the set championship format as it currently stands, feel free to leave comments down below. We would love to hear them, and we'll see you guys on the next one.